just like we would normally. As you can tell, a lot smaller. I'm using a little star tip. And as you can tell, it's all about pressure and about pressure control when it comes to working with this. Anytime you're working with any icing that you're piping, all you have to do is just squeeze when you're supposed to, move it where you need to, and then stop squeezing, and it tapers right down to a point. There's a lot of tips in your kit, and there's a lot of things you can pipe. This is a star tip, of course. In here, this is a little older kit, but this tip right here is a leaf tip. Makes wonderful leaves. Where's my other leaf tip? This is a leaf tip as well. Some of the things you may never have seen being used. If you're not familiar with using the coupler, use your coupler. It's wonderful because you can change out tips, put on a leaf tip. Leaves are a lot of fun to do. The way I do a leaf is I squeeze and I let it come out to a point. They create sort of like ivy leaves, like English ivy. But you got to find a way to get the point nice and pointy. Of course, it's more effective when they're green, but that's one type of leaf tip. The other type looks like a little baby bird's beak. A lot of possibilities with a couple of these because they create something that's a little different. This one can create something of a ribbon effect. If you turn it sideways though, little leaves come out. As you can see, lots of possibilities when it comes to different shapes. And this little kit is very versatile. Lots of possibilities when you start playing around with these tips. Getting back to my star tip here. That's one of the things I love about couplers. Just change it out, move to something else. Your rope design, of course, little S's. Remember, gentle S's. And it creates the illusion, the same kind of illusion, but a lot smaller. I'd like you guys to use this stuff for homework. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's smoother, it's easier to pipe. When it comes to Cornelli, Cornelli lace is infinitely easier. A little tiny straight tip. This is a little number 2. I think you guys may have more straight tips in here than I have in my old kit. But the straight tip is really wonderful because you can press down and then lift away and just kind of let that curvy line fall. I was talking to Brittany earlier. I said it's sort of like riding a horse in that you do steer the horse, but in a way you're not really steering the horse because you're also just encouraging the horse to go where you think it's going to go. But the horse kind of goes where it wants to go too. And that's the way it is when this stuff is kind of curving around. You're kind of guiding it, but you're not absolutely in control. The thing I try to be careful of with Cornelli is not allowing any patterns to start to show. And as you can see, nice consistent lines. I mean, the thing is that it's all the same width. It doesn't get stuck on you. It doesn't start forming. It doesn't clog up your tip. There are some things that will clog up your tip, of course. Any of these crusties on the side of your plastic container will get in there and just clog up your tip and drive you crazy. So if you need to, if you're at home, keep a little needle nearby so you can kind of go in there and push them out of the way. Otherwise, you'll have to clean out your tip and hope there are no more to come. You know, they just drive you kind of nuts. But the other trick with royal icing is that it takes a fair amount of energy to squeeze this. Don't put too much in your bag. This is one quick way to get carpal tunnel, is to put too much in your bag and then you're squeezing and squeezing. Try to keep your wrist straight. Otherwise, these tendons are going to start getting really achy, and then you're going to find you get a lot of sharp pains right in the palm of your hand, right in the middle. And that's just trouble right there. So take good care of yourself by keeping the wrist straight, small amount, have lots of leverage, and you'll be able to get through quite a bit of piping. I mean, what if you had to do Cornelli lace over an entire 10-inch layer of the cake? An entire 10-inch tier. That's a lot of surface area. Now, royal icing, it goes pretty easily, a lot easier than with some other things, but you still want to make sure that you're taking good care of your hands. What other things can we do? Well, there are other shapes. As you can see, I made a couple of shapes earlier just by tracing some of these filigree shapes that I had, and I let them dry. They're not very hard to pipe. All I did was I drew them on the back of the paper, flipped it over, so that I'm not going to get pencil lead all over my icing. And then when it comes time to trace them, I lift up a little bit and let the royal icing stretch a little bit. And you start tracing. Like I said, if you don't feel like you're a person who can draw, don't worry about it. There's always the ability to trace. And remember that there's a lot of good source stuff out there on the internet, and if you find something you like, a pattern you like, something like that, print it off, bring it in, and then put it underneath your parchment, trace it. You know, I mean, it sounds like cheating, but you know, I used to know an executive pastry chef who couldn't draw to save her life. Stick figures were hard. You know, what'd she do? Everybody she hired had like experience in the arts. Everybody. I mean, she'd want to see their work. She'd want to see their portfolio. I was one of them. I had, I'd been to school, I'd been to college for art, and I had put a lot of time in painting classes and drawing classes, so she liked having me around. But it was one of those things that she always hired people that could do what she couldn't do, right? She hired based on her own weaknesses, and it made a lot of sense. Earlier I had this skull here. I drew this little skull and I kind of traced it out. That's one little idea. What about this little tree I drew though? Is there something we can do with that? I can go and start by getting these roots kind of outlined.
Happy tree.
Yeah, reasonably happy. But where do you go from there? You know, you got to you start running into little places where you kind of need to do something. And you have to make those decisions sometimes on the fly. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill in some areas of this trunk, because trunks are great, but by itself that'd be kind of boring. So I'm going to go ahead and do something I normally do in monograms. I'm going to go ahead and fill it in. Monograms are very popular. After all, they personalize a cake, they personalize anything you put them on. I'm just going to do just general fill here, and then I'm going to go ahead and do sort of a back and forth motion to kind of get some texture into this. So that looks pretty good by itself, but let's take this one step further. Start building up some height. When I make monograms, what I'll do is I'll make an outline of a letter form. I'll fill it, usually with a softer version of the same royal icing. That'll form sort of a flood, as we call it, with a softer, like almost fluid royal icing. Once that's dry, I'll do this stitching back and forth, almost like it becomes embroidery. And if you do it with a really fine tip, you can get this wonderful look that looks like thread stitching back and forth. And with this tree, we can do the same thing. I can make it small here, do little stitches. And what it does, it not only gives it texture, but also gives it height, so it starts to get more of a three-dimensional effect. And after all, trees aren't flat, right? Trees are round, trees are solid. So